Welcome in, APUSH Nation. This is it, our last Fireside chat of the year. And the topic, the Great Awakenings, one that has seemingly befuddled us all year long for whatever reason. Now, before we get going, just two things. And I kind of have a sense out there of what you guys may be thinking right now. The first is, wow, is this really it? Is this really the last Fireside chat? I'm so bummed out about that because, this has been like one of the best experiences I've had ever in any class, bar none. And yes, that is true. The year is over on Friday. The Fireside chats will end tonight. The other thing that I think you're wondering is probably, what a cool t-shirt you're wearing, Mr. Smith. Could you show that off a little bit? And yeah, why not? So I had a rep for the last one of my favorite t-shirts, a gift of a former student, former APUSH Nation member, and mainly because it's repping my man, Chuck Bass.
And who are you?
I'm Chuck Bass.
All right, well, let's get down to business here, all fun and games aside. Now, when it comes to the Great Awakenings, we've really hit the first two quite hard. And I'm going to do a quick recap. It was requested by some of you that I focus on the first and second Great Awakening again a little bit. So here we go. The first Great Awakening, what you want to most take away from that is that it was a classic case of transatlantic exchange that was occurring before the American Revolution. There was a general dissatisfaction with the churches that were and religion over in England, Scotland, Ireland. And so preachers began spreading new words of inspiration, new messages of religion, in particular revivalism, reviving people's religious sentiments, reviving people's religious hunger and desire to be a good person, to be moralistic, and that was fading over in Europe. And preachers like George Whitefield. George Whitefield is without a doubt maybe one of the most important names that you guys could associate with the First Great Awakening. And Whitefield came to the United States. Eventually, he migrated to the United States, became good friends with Benjamin Franklin. And it was while in the colonies that his message of revivalism just totally took off. And then it was picked up by American ministers, one of whom was Jonathan Edwards. And if you think back to the beginning of the year, you guys read one of Edwards' speech, "The Sinner's in the Hands of an Angry God." Now, that speech is classic First Great Awakening because it's hostile, it's aggressive, it's bellicose, it's fiery. And that was one of the main ideas that came out of the First Great Awakening. And people really, one of the big issues that came up is the First Great Awakening challenged the conventional notion that had been so long dominant in religion in the colonies, and that was predestination, a theory that, of course, the Pilgrims subscribed to. The First Great Awakening took down the whole theory of predestination. It didn't believe in that, and the preachers didn't preach that. And through these big revival meetings and large sermons, a new message was being promoted to the American colonists. And the First Great Awakening would continue on into the formation of the United States. And one of the great ideas that really had the most long-lasting social impact of the First Great Awakening was the idea that people could better themselves in life, that people could rise up, that whether it was through business, industry, perseverance, sheer talent, pious behavior, you could advance in the world. And that was something, if you think back to the beginning of the year, we said was one of the most revolutionary concepts attached to the American society that was created when the Constitution was written and the British were, of course, defeated. You could actually move up in America. And so maybe the best way I can describe the First Great Awakening and its broad influence was that it promoted a sense of egalitarianism as a national ethic, as an actual American belief. And something else we talked about was the role of education. A number of schools and universities were attached with the First Great Awakening, although, be very careful, it was not a byproduct of the Enlightenment. The two ideas often ran against each other. Enlightenment professed spiritual awakening through literature, through political consciousness, through deism, which was separate from the First Great Awakening. So be really careful of confusing those two. Now, everything, as we know, plays together when it comes to the progression of our year and the Second Great Awakening is really just, in a lot of ways, a continuation on some of the same ideas the First Great Awakening professed. The belief that people could save themselves. I mean, that was probably one of the most important doctrines that came out of the Second Great Awakening, which started around the early 1800s and would flow all throughout the mid-1800s as well. So for almost half a century, the Second Great Awakening had a prolific impact on the United States and politics and social life as well. Now, much like the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening struck down the notion of predestination. One of the chief differences, though, between 1 and 2 was camp meetings. This were the name for preachers that preached and traveled all throughout the United States, much in part thanks to new modes of transportation like canals and roads. And in fact, remember, the Second Great Awakening was nicknamed the Burnt Over District, or the region in New York where the Second Great Awakening occurred. Was called the Burnt Over District because there was so many of these camp meetings and thousands of people traveling and moving all over. When I did some research on the Second Great Awakening again and thought of a way I could further enhance your understanding, think of it like this. Many Americans began to convert back to Christianity. There was a new sense of conversion with the Second Great Awakening. Series of new churches that were created. Baptist, Methodist were two of the most prominent. But the idea was that Americans had to brace themselves for the second coming of Christ. And if you're a Christian, that's one of your core beliefs as a Christian. And so in order to brace yourself for the second coming, that's where you get some of the nativist movement was sort of mixed in with that idea. You know, the purification of American society, the purification and leaving the United States a purely Protestant nation. Temperance, the ban on alcohol that started up, the temperance movement of the 1830s and 40s was tied directly to the Second Great Awakening. Abolition was tied directly with the Second Great Awakening, and that would, of course, reverberate all on into the post-Civil War Reconstruction era. Women's suffrage, the same idea, again, the purifying of the United States society. So women were heavily involved, very much influenced by the Second Great Awakening. And that would spawn things like the Seneca Falls Convention. So you've got new churches popping up all over the United States. You've got new ideas being introduced in the social conscience of America, thanks in part to religion. And by the mid-1800s, the Second Great Awakening really had left its mark on the United States. And it would feed directly into the Third Great Awakening, which is one that you may think, well, we haven't really talked about this or anything yet, but we kind of have, actually. And I just didn't really, I guess at the time, deem it. I kind of guess you could say I made a mistake. I'm not afraid to admit. I should have called what we talked about with the social gospel movement, the Whole House movement, the YMCA, YWCA. Those progressive measures were truly progressive in both political and social America, but also in religion. And so the Third Great Awakening was right at the end of the 19th century, so late 1800s, and it spilled right over into the turn of the century. So all those progressive measures of giving back to the poor, doing your part in society to help immigrants, which is what the Whole House movement aimed to do. And when you compare the Third Great Awakening to the First and Second, one of the most important ideas was that people shifted a notion that personal sin was what you needed to focus on in your salvation, in your religious experience. Instead, the Third Great Awakening, and listen, this is what I would underline star in your notes, is about social sin. That Americans that were caught up in the Third Great Awakening felt compelled to cleanse society, to eradicate all the inequities that rose up in the United States due to the Reconstruction with race, due to big business and labor with the Gilded Age, women's rights, and general civil rights in America. So the Third Great Awakening was really an attack on inequities, social inequities. And the idea was that the government and the church could actually truly influence people's lives and could really actually bring relief to people. And therefore, you really get the idea that a person's spiritual failure is not so much individualistic, but it's actually more a product of society. That being poor is not a sign that you are a weak spiritual person or a bad Christian. It's more society's issue than it is a personal issue. And maybe that's one thing that you guys can keep in mind. Now, something else we talked about surrounding the Third Great Awakening was the rise of fundamentalism, and that was strict adherence to the Bible, strict adherence to religion, and we have the classic case of the 1920s, which was going on in the Third Great Awakening, and that was the Scopes trial in the 1920s down in Tennessee, where religion was trying to, and Tennesseans were rallying against the idea that Darwin's theories should not be taught in school. And if you recall from that trial, which involved William Jennings Bryan, one of your guys' favorite characters of APUSH, he defended one of the clients in that case, and the idea was that the court ruled that schools could not teach Darwin, but ultimately, you know how that all breaks down. But this is, again, a really good moment to sort of stick with the Third Great Awakening, and it was really all about the sweeping societal changes that the progressive era attempted to really mitigate, and that was attached in a lot of those cases directly with religion. So now we're at the Fourth Great Awakening, and this is the most modern Great Awakening. It really started up after World War II. And so the Fourth Great Awakening started up after World War II, and it really, again, seeps into a lot of the political issues that we've talked about so far this year. In the 50s, you had the rise of consumption and consumerism, and the Fourth Great Awakening's religious movement really was an attack on that phenomena. It was calling upon people to return to religion, to reassert their moralistic values in the face of all the sex and drugs and protests of the Vietnam era. Once again, fundamentalism was a component, and strict adherence to the Bible and to church was professed in the Fourth Great Awakening. You have all types of different churches starting to come up, Pentecostal denominations, born-again Christians, Mormonism really sparks a revival. And essentially, here's something very important. If the Second Great Awakening, the Third Great Awakening was all about shifting sin to society, that society is responsible for a lot of the sin. The Fourth Great Awakening said, no way. It's back to the individual. So we actually come full circle from the Fourth Great Awakening in the 1900s to the very First Great Awakening in that respect. And so moral values, traditional values were professed. And if you think back to what we talked about, then this makes sense why the conservative revival that happened in politics was so successful in a way, because people like Nixon and Goldwater and Ford and Reagan, especially Reagan with the moral majority, these are the politicians who capitalized on the religious Fourth Great Awakening and would really begin to heavily criticize some of the issues of the old segregation in the United States and consumption. Another value attached with the Fourth Great Awakening was pro-life. I mean, this of course came in the wake of the Roe v. Wade case, but most fundamental Christian groups and Pentecostal churches that rose up in the Fourth Great Awakening were pro-family, pro-life, and something else about the Fourth Great Awakening that in a way comes full circle back to the first is the passion, the inspirational preachings that are so well known with the Fourth Great Awakening. And I'm going to leave you with a video clip actually here today to give you a sense from one of the most important names to associate with the Fourth Great Awakening. That was Billy Graham. Billy Graham was a born-again preacher who swept the nation and capitalized on TV in a way that Jonathan Edwards wished he could have, or obviously it was the 1700s, he had no notion of TV, but had Jonathan Edwards had a television like Billy Graham did, he may have been vaulted into the consciousness of American history. And so I'm going to turn over to a quick clip of Billy Graham to give you a sense of what he professed.
You'll have periods of happiness. It's not a goal. Our goal is to obey God. Our goal is to do the will of God. Our goal is to be a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ. And as we move along, we will pick up happiness here and there along the way. If you sense a longing for God, a desire to change and be a new person, that's God speaking to your heart. And as you respond, he will give you the ability and the power to change, because he has to do the changing. To delay makes the right decision harder. And indecision in itself is a choice. You decide tonight that you're going to wait till some other time. That's a choice.
Well, hopefully that little recap, a short clip from Billy Graham's speech, and everything else I've said tonight has helped you guys. I'm going to save my big, long-winded, good luck speeches to you guys Thursday. So for now, I'm just going to end things as I always do and tell you guys that the past shapes the future. It's been a heck of a ride. Thank you for watching all year, and I wish everyone the best of luck out there as they take their AP exam this Friday. So take care.